Silver is going absolutely crazy right now. The stock market is in one of the most interesting spots it's ever been in, as futures were blocked from trading for the past, 8 hours or so because of a CME outage. Also, at the same time, we had a very interesting attack from the S&P on Tether, as they basically downgraded the rating of Tether, which is peculiar because why now? And why do this for a company that has over-collateralized their stuff? Why Tether? Anyway, talking about performances, talking about odd things, apparently Bitcoin has been underperforming the Nasdaq with some pretty staggering numbers over the past month. But that's not all. Just a few days ago, we talked about the idea that gold to silver ratio had an interesting number right now, and that silver was actually pretty undervalued. And now, just about a week later or so, let me quickly put it up right here, we can see that silver prices are now up 5.5 times more than the S&P from the start of the year up till now, in the middle of the biggest technological revolution since the internet. And the quote here is, asset owners will continue to win. Well, I would state this is actually an interesting point here as well. President Trump says he will keep the stock market at all-time highs and calls the market hot with a big boost for 401ks. The S&P rises to levels just 1% away from new record highs as this is ongoing. Kind of crazy though to have a freaking president of the country say stocks are going to be your best thing, because the last time he said that he'll keep stocks higher, that stocks will look good or something along those lines, the stock market had a really, really massive season. And actually, if you're wondering what's going on right now, besides the stranger parts, like for example, CME going down for a few hours today because of a heating issue, Trump just said he will keep stocks at record highs. $600 billion a year in magnificent 7 capex. Fed cutting interest rates into 3+% inflation. Global AI infrastructure spending $1 trillion a year. Fed ending the quantitative tightening in just around 2 days. The U.S. deficit spending at 6% or greater of U.S. GDP. NVIDIA larger than all but 5 national stock markets. That is actually really crazy as well. Record corporate buybacks at $1.2 trillion coming in 2026. With Trump saying he will completely cut out income taxes because of all the new income from the tariffs. Now that, of course, I don't think is going to actually happen, but cut them could happen. Completely cut income tax? I refuse to believe that. If it were to happen, though, that would be the most strange thing that I would think it would ever happen. In the world of finance, I think that would be the craziest thing that would have ever happened. If Trump cuts income taxes, that would be the strangest thing I've ever seen in the world of finance by far. And Trump also proposing a $2,000 stimulus check in 2026, $2,000. Let's see how that is going to come out. But a good question is, how can you fight this momentum? And I tell you guys, if we're talking about our crypto coins, our lovely crypto coins, I keep telling you, they follow the sentiment of major markets. And let's just say how the S&P, Nasdaq, how the overall US is performing, cryptos seem to follow that along. Do they have to? No. But generally speaking, they have. And they most likely, and this is just my own personal opinion, will keep doing so for a good while. I think at some point in the future, it should decouple from all this and find its own 2 feet to stand on and maybe just follow along with more so gold, but we're not there yet. Anyway, getting back to my earlier stated piece here, Bitcoin underperforming the Nasdaq for 70% of the days. You want to know a little fun fact? I kind of feel as if the market that we've seen here recently, which what I personally believe was also a coordinated, manipulated effort. Ever since the 10th of the 10th, I don't think the market's been too healthy. However, ever since that happened, we've been seeing, let's call it, a bear market for our crypto coins. About, let's call it, 1.5 months of very big panic, very thin liquidity that right now slowly but surely is building back up. There are some key players that state 93 or 94,000 is where we kind of peak at before a more major fall. And I keep saying, I think we're going to most likely see these gains pull through. 93,000 has been hit, by the way. My own target that I stated from $81,000 has been hit at 93. This is what I was looking out for the most. But from this point forward, because of the momentum that's building, especially in, let's call it, the overarching stock market, with all the massive and major announcements, most of the outlooks here being bullish, I still have a feeling as we get closer and closer to the 10th of December, the Federal Reserve interest rate cut, we could actually see some very positive momentum. Again, think about it. What exactly could cause us to go down? Very recently here this month, there have been no massive pushers. There's really been not that negative of a thing except for the AI bubble bursting, causing stocks to fall pretty heavily, which caused Bitcoin to also have that day where it went to 80,000, and before the 10th of the 10th. But even that was kind of a BS announcement. Then again, it made the stock market go down. This whole coordinated move downwards, what was it based on? And people keep saying, well, yeah, it's bear market, but based on what? I always say that the bear market starts when things get a bit too stupid. And things really weren't that stupid altogether. I mean, I'm a little bit less bullish on altcoins here as I usually am, especially in a recovering market, but that's because I want to be quote unquote safe. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing I say here is financial advice. I'm just sharing my journey, my story, and whatever news I find of these cryptocurrency things or stock things, and I share them with you. At the end of the day, I'm giving you my interpretation of them, but I'm not a financial advisor. Just give my thoughts. And my thoughts here are as well that altcoins, even though they greatly outperform when the market is really good and really hot, in bad times like right now or uncertain times, even though as an underlying thought, we do still believe that usually when the sentiment is disconnected from data, it's the sentiment that catches up to the data, not the other way around, which basically means that if whatever people are saying is not the exact same as the market's doing, so in this case, price is going up, but people are saying it should be going to zero, right? So that's, let's call it diverging. It's the sentiment, so the thoughts and the people's emotions that catch up with whatever the market is doing at that point and not the other way around. Now, why is that crucial in all this? Well, because I personally believe that right now there's a mass manipulation going on, a massive input of fear being installed into you. For example, with this now attack on Tether, what did the S&P do? They basically downgraded the Tether rating, even though they're 4% over collateralized. They're holding 5% in Bitcoin, most of it in UST bills and gold. They're the largest single holder of gold that's not a governmental entity, I believe. Why did they do that then? Why did they push those numbers down? Why? I keep saying, I think it's a broader, coordinated, manipulating effort. Some have said the same thing about today. This situation, the CME going down, basically, they call it a manipulated effort. Some are saying this was an attack to not let silver go too high. I'm not going to be the one to state that. Here, this article is stating that there's basically capacities to how far our AI bubble and all that stuff can go because of energy restraints, for example, or because of technical thermodynamic ceilings. Anyway, to get back to my whole sentiment versus data little argument here. If we're keeping in the back of our head that there was no real good reason for the market to go down, why is sentiment then so bad? Well, again, because of all the fear that's being installed, because of announcements like this, like MicroStrategy getting attacked by MSCI, right now, Tether getting attacked by the S&P. And that is also making me kind of afraid of any sort of move here back towards the downside from the 93K range. Why? Because if I cannot explain what was causing the market to go down before, and I've read so much, I've talked with so many, nobody can give a convincing argument that besides major stocks here, for the market to drop this much. I'm not talking about the drop to 100K on the 10th of the 10th. I can understand that. But I'm talking going all the way towards $80,000. Nobody can really explain why it went so fast. Mostly just thinning liquidity, no market participation, mostly just people taking their hands off, not trying to spend their carry before the end of the year because they don't want to risk giving up gains. So they're just staying off, not trying to catch this because of the thinning liquidity. That's like a little worsening cycle. However, now then, of course, the argument still stays that many funds do not want to participate because of the fear. But bringing my whole argument together, the reason I'm a little bit less excited about altcoins is because if I could not explain the fear before, and I really can't explain some of the fear factors right now, they don't make sense to me. They just all seem stupid and pretentious. That means I should be even more fearful because that means the market can move based on no real good reason. And any announcement that normally should move the market by 4% might just drop by another 15 or 20%, and altcoins are a lot more vulnerable to that. I'm not talking about coins outside or inside the little bubble of top coins like ETH, SOL, XRP, BNB maybe. Those, in my opinion, are quite solid where, sure, they might do slightly worse than BTC. It will still be mostly on par with on the good days doing a bit better, on the bad days doing a bit worse. But recently here, some of these days, XRP, for example, was mostly just greener than BTC, whereas Solana, for example, was mostly doing worse than BTC. It's a bit of the same line here. ETH, for example, might have even been more stable than Bitcoin recently. So when does this change? I'm going to say that this changes once we get back into our normal rhythm of people staying away from this, the bear market is here type of thought. And even though theoretically speaking, I'd say the consensus is still that the bear market is not confirmed until Bitcoin, if we quickly go back to this broader view, that Bitcoin is not in a quote-unquote bear market until we take out this previous bottom at roughly 77,000. A question does spark up. of do you want to catch that knife? Do you want to actually attempt to break your hands trying to hold that, right? And this is what we talked about before. Remember, guys, we talked about this for Bitcoin since $81,000, that generally speaking, we could also make another sort of head and shoulder pattern. We had ourselves let's quickly draw it in here. We had ourselves the head here, the shoulder here, the head here, and now another shoulder forming, for example. And depending on whether or not it's like let's call it an incline, we continue on with the bull market, or if it's a sort of, let's call it a decline, we top out here, maybe 115,000 or so, we get negative again. I'm just saying like this, as long as Bitcoin is below the main moving average, is below $100,000, we are in no man's land, because it just doesn't make sense for Bitcoin to trade this low, and I'm more afraid. Right after the 10th of December, though, I'm going to say, depending on what happens around that date, if we stay positive, it's less of a buy the rumor, sell the news event. There's a higher likelihood the market can continue further. Why? Well, right now, I am a bit skeptical that people are actually buying up, mostly just with the idea that on December 10th, they can sell going into a rate cut, going into the new period coming in for the Fed and stuff like that, potentially also into a new candidate for the Federal Reserve. But then at the end of the year, actually selling it off, or slightly before this major event, selling it off as well. Because if we all know the Fed is going to cut rates, maybe they'll sell just before that. Now, how will I react when different things happen? If we're taking a look at cryptocurrency prices right now, for XRP, for example, if we get back to the 181, mostly 183 below, I will actually continue buying. If I had $0 worth, I would probably start my buys at $2 and below. Right now, I think relatively from a risk-reward perspective, it's not worth it. I personally keep adding every single day, but it's not necessarily what I would do if I was new or if I was trying to make a proper plan. My plan is just buy every day, don't think about it. But again, that has higher risk and higher emotional tolerances necessary. For BTC, where would I start purchasing? Well, everywhere within this zone, from 110 to now, is kind of neutral. If I was a normal market participant, I'd still purchase. If I was new and I try to get a good deal, I would hope to get myself a buy below 83,000, basically at the 100 moving average, or at 50% or less of an extension of the 200 moving average, with, again, my first buys being around that area, my secondary buys being around 77, and then these are kind of arbitrary. I'm going to say maybe 71, and then all the way down at 61, and with my last buys, my final line of defense at like $55,000, $53,000. That's the last area where I will buy. Below that, I wouldn't even touch it. This is where I basically am all in. How high of a probability? I think quite small. I'm not preparing for it to happen, but that's also because I never want to be all in. I always want to have some capacity of freedom. And so some people actually are selling off here again at 91, 92, 93. Why? Well, because they got to buy themselves in oversold. And like I told you before, neutral here, this whole area, you're indecisive. Buying or selling, they both make sense depending on basically how you set yourself up before. However, it's only once 111 that, theoretically speaking, selling becomes way more juicy, let's call it. And it's only below 82, 83 that selling becomes so bad and buying is more just in the back of my head. Right now, it just depends on your overarching strategy. And I said before, this 93 area, as you look back at previous prices, this is again the moment where we might face some troubles, 93, potentially 94. This is exactly what we're facing some troubles at right now, just as expected, just as predicted over the past few days. And again, I never claim to have a freaking golden ball or a freaking glass ball. All we're doing is looking at the most crucial pinpoints in Bitcoin's prices, saying, hey, there's a very high likelihood it's going to get dragged to that level, grabbed into it and face some struggles around there. Right now, we're seeing that happening. What's going to happen next? Well, again, as of this point, we didn't short at 93. I didn't really cash at everything at 93 because I have a longer overarching strategy. If you're looking for a platform to trade on, you can check out the link down below to Blowfin. Right now, you also get yourself a free $300 futures airdrop, so a nice position. And I've got a good section at the start of the video where I explain how to claim it. Also, if you want to see what we are trading, you can check out Telegram, right? Link is down below. Most of the trades recently here, I'm just going to check it out again, have been really pretty accurate. Let me again double confirm here all the trades of recently. Yeah. I'm going to say almost anybody who's joined the Telegram, which is completely free, by the way, has been really satisfied recently because there have been a lot of freaking bangers. Of course, you'll have some losses too, but the goal is never to only have wins. The goal is to make a lot of money over time. And recently here, that's been doing pretty good. So again, if you've not done it yet, make sure you check it out. Link is down below to Telegram. And to get back on the drawing board, I have a personal bias to stay bullish, to stay excited. But I also understand if some people don't share that, because they want some more confirmations first. And I'm going to say again, if you're looking for the next line of confirmations, it's potentially if we actually manage to bounce off of this support again, just like we were able to do a little while ago back here in, let's call it the end of December area, right? It's back then you can see we bounced off of this a long time, and the moment we broke through, it was a pretty big breakthrough. Maybe now the moment we break above and actually get another bounce off there, we can make our journey back towards, at first I'm going to say, if we bounce off, the moving average. So in this case here, roughly around 102 or so. But I think along the way, we will have $100,000 as a major psychological barrier. Then again, sometimes you'd be surprised how little a psychological barrier actually has an effect for. Because in the previous times, again, how many times did it struggle at 100K at BTC? Well, potentially a few times here, but mostly, it just broke through with not that much of a hassle. So this time around, again, perhaps more so going to be looking at the moving average around $103,000 as a next target if we are able to hold 93. And why am I sharing so much of this stuff, like the price talk and less fundamentals? Well, because a lot of people are watching these things right now. And so basically, if I'm going to change my strategy up, it's going to have to do with something along these lines. But yeah, that's why I'm a bit less excited about altcoins. That's why I'm a bit skeptical for doing anything irrational, anything crazy right now. But I'm still a net buyer. I'm still very excited. And I believe as well, they're trying to get you out. But generally speaking, with a thriving market, the last time that Trump said this, and he's basically the only president ever to do this type of stuff, we had a really, really good period. Risk reward wise, it just makes sense for me to keep going at it. And again, if the market goes down lower, like I said before, as long as you have this longer term vision of the crypto market surviving, which I have, then these are all opportunities, and it just changes your risk reward from, okay, it's a pretty good idea to just buy some more, to, ooh, it's a pretty good idea because either it's going to zero or I get myself a very, very good buy. And I don't think this stuff is going to zero. Yeah, that's about it. Make sure you press the like button if you enjoyed it. And see you guys again in another crypto video somewhere, probably later today, maybe tomorrow. Who knows?